Hello and good morning. I'm your host, Marcus Ruiz Evans. We have another fantastic interview for you with a insightful thinker who's challenging the narrative here in America, Jeremy Zogby of Zogby Polling. If you're not aware in the world of politics, Zogby Polling is an institution. For many years, they've correctly predicted presidential elections and other things that had yet to come to pass. So we've been looking at Zogby Polling to get an indication of where Americans think about certain things because they have been able to take a standalone stance and were right, particularly when other polling agencies had predicted something different, and Zogby turned out to call it correctly. So I find them very fascinating. Jeremy's a personal colleague and friend of mine, and today we would like to talk about a new poll. And again, for everybody watching, please do not email me or call me or attempt to shut down my channel. I am not taking a stance on anything. We are simply covering facts and data about the political situation and how it is changing. Zogby recently did a poll about the topic of COVID mandates and support amongst the general American population for them. I'm going to shut up and turn it over to Jeremy. Jeremy, what was this poll? Did I capture it correctly? And what did the findings show that I think was a little bit alarming or at least interesting for those of us who follow this?
Yeah, so first off, I've been tracking this with Zogby Strategies. We've been tracking this for quite some time now. You have been tracking it. You've looked at some polling surrounding the mandate. And earlier you were talking about the notion of it trending down. Now, up front, I have to acknowledge that at the same time that I like to track the same questions, I also like to switch it up with messages to see what happens. And so one thing right up front listeners and viewers should know is if you're comparing a Zogby poll with, say, Wall Street Journal or Politico or whatever, make sure that you look at the exact wording. So I'm going to start off with what I'm showing right now. And this goes beyond a simple, do you support federal mandates or government mandates, whatever the language, national mandates, for a COVID-19 vaccine, whether it's the choice yes or no, or do you strongly somewhat approve, somewhat strongly somewhat disapprove. And so the difference is this question here, the way I worded it, which of the following statements do you agree with more regarding the government mandating the COVID-19 vaccine? Choice one, I believe in personal choice versus I believe in federal mandates. And so when you frame it like that, overwhelmingly, there's a majority, 53% of Americans who say, I side with personal choice. In other words, a majority, a strong majority, side with personal sovereignty, with personal decision making. Many of those people may be vaccinated. They no question about it, and looking at the numbers, many of them are, but they're saying, I don't want to see that forced on other people. It's only 37% who say, I want to see the federal government mandate it to Americans. So almost 2-to-1 personal choice over mandate. And I think that is why you see such a big gap, is I think the other questions are just saying, do you agree with government mandate, yes or no? Do you strongly approve of it? They're not giving the other option. Does that make sense?
That does. And I will say, good point. You're always straighten out the thinking on the polling. That's why I like talking to you. We can not only look at the results of the poll, but we can actually open up the sausage factory, as they speak about with democracy, and look inside how the actual product's made and get that in-depth review. Jeremy's referring to these other polls. Again, we don't know the questions that they ask. I did not take the time to look in the questions. So as Jeremy's saying, it's unfair to take these other polls and compare them to Zogby in a straight line comparison because we don't know the questions they were asking. And as I've talked about many times, the frame of the question can change the response of the narrative. But in general, what I like to point out is that, and this gets to a general question about your poll. I have been told for months, majority of Americans support the mandate. End of story. Yeah. End of story. No debate, no question at all. Overwhelming, sizable majority support this. No debate, no question at all. That's the way it is. Deal with it. Your poll seems to say the total opposite of what I've been told by the news and everyone that I know for the last couple months. And the reason that I liked it was I thought they were lying to me. I knew many people. I mean, I'm in politics for 10 years and I have a lot of friends, and they don't talk about politics with me at all because they know I'm a little bit wired on it. The day that Joe Biden announced the mandate, I got phone calls from friends who don't engage in politics saying this is horrible and we can't do this. So I was like, there's an immediate backlash to this in my personal connections with humans that was not reflected in what I saw in the news and not reflected in what I saw in popular conversation. These are some of the polls that seem to back that up. September 10th to the 13th, an Axis poll showed 60% supported the mandate. November 5th to 7th, 55% supported the mandate, according to a Morning Consult political poll. December 6th, 50% support the mandate, according to a Wall Street Journal original Rand poll. And finally, December 29th, 37% support, according to Zogby. And again, we don't know the questions. It is unfair to compare them. But when we do a casual glance, what I'm seeing is massive support in December, drops down kind of the beginning of November going into December, it starts getting low, and then it nearly bottoms out or hits a super low at the end of December. Do you agree that there might be some sort of trend of a high in September that just seems to drag down to where we are here in the beginning of January? Or was, people always against this, in your opinion? Because the polls, and I understand we can't compare them the way that I'm doing it. I get it. It's a general version, but really does seem to suggest a downward slide from here's where it was originated and postulated, and then support just kept dropping.
Yeah.
Way off base, roughly correct? What say you, sir?
I don't. I can't say you're way off base. I can't even say that you're off base. And we can compare these questions. We just have to understand the nuances in the language, that when you ask somebody, do you agree or disagree? And here's the one issue. And then you're asking people with government mandates of the vaccine, agree or disagree, that there's a different effect when you present it as not just agree, disagree, but if you say government mandate or my body, my choice. I first picked up on this because I was asking this question the standard way, the agree and disagree on the mandate. And forgive me, I can't remember, what I was getting, although I will dig into the data, and folks should know what the results were. So I'll get into that, as we go into the conversation. But I saw a Trafalgar poll back in, I think it was March, this past March, maybe it was February, and earlier in the year, and they had presented it as personal choice versus government mandate. Now their poll results were showing 70% siding with personal choice. I don't agree with that. Trafalgar Group, look, I'm not going to say anything bad about them, but they're Republican pollsters, so they have skin in the Republican game. They're not independent. They're Republican pollsters. So
sure,
based on that could really have an impact on how they're modeling their data and how they arrive at that 70%. But that's when I said, you know what? They're pretty smart. They brought a new level to this question that I kind of overlooked. So I said, why don't I do my own testing? So we did this. Months later, I tried, and this was actually just a few months ago, my body, my choice. Which one do you side with? My body, my choice, or the government should mandate the vaccine to Americans? When you put it like that, 57% of Americans side with my body, my choice, versus just a little bit over a third who side with the national mandates, 2-1. And so now I played around again with this recent poll, and I said, well, let me get away from my body, my choice, and let me try the Trafalgar wording and go with personal choice. And it was at 53%. The margin of error is plus or minus 4 points, so we're in the same territory. But I cannot deny the fact that the notion of a mandate is, I wouldn't say it's gaining steam. It's certainly not gaining steam. It could be on the downward trend, but my data shows over the last few months that it's steadily Americans side with personal choice. Americans made in droves and in droves have gone to get the vaccine, but that doesn't mean that they necessarily want to see it forced onto somebody they disagree with. Now, let me jump in because we're talking quantitative here.
Right.
I've done focus groups on the issue, focus groups of only vaccinated participants and focus groups of only unvaccinated participants. And when I was, probing the vaccinated participants, the question of mandates came up. There were 12 people in the group. That's not statistically significant, but it's qualitatively important to note. 11 out of 12 could not get on board with forcing mandates on those who say, I disagree with it philosophically, medically, or whatever, that they don't want to get the vaccine. One guy said in the focus group, that is straight up communism. I asked the other people, do you agree with that? Is that authoritarian? And they said, we can't get on board with this. A woman was a teacher, and in her district, it was a major issue. There were 30% who weren't vaccinated, and they were putting pressure. The teachers' unions in the school district were putting pressure on the 30% and saying, you got to do it. And I said, well, what about you? You work in a school, there are hundreds of people in a building. Can you get behind it? She said, I cannot get behind it. And so I think right now that the story of the day regarding mandates is that you can convince most Americans to get vaccinated, but you cannot convince them to force it on people who believe in their heart of heart that either it is wrong or it is not good for them.
That was the impression that I had. The day that Joe Biden announced the mandate, again, multiple people who don't discuss politics with me called me, one of whom who had the vaccine, one of whom who didn't. And they both said the exact same thing. This is the Rubicon, and it has been crossed. It is a bridge too far. If you wanted to suggest the vaccine, that's fine. But mandating them is un-American. And again, somebody was vaccinated and called me and said that, and 5 minutes later, a person who was unvaccinated called me and said the exact same thing. Both of those people don't know each other, don't talk, called me within 5 minutes of each other, and typically don't participate in politics, which told me a lot, that there was some sort of identity line about what America means that theoretically was crossed, at least according to some people, in a way that shocked the hell out of them.
Well, this is the time to be jolly and to join with your family. And I had family fly in from out of state. And of course, this is a big bone of contention within every family, not necessarily an immediate family, but extended family. This has invaded its way into every home. And so those who are vaccinated and who are saying, I don't want to see vaccines forced on people who don't want to get it. Well, I think ultimately what they're realizing, and I've heard this from some of my own family, is that, well, hey, I got vaccinated and I wear a mask. And so aren't I protected? Isn't that what the public was sold on? Weren't they sold on that it would mitigate and that it would stop transmissibility? Well, lo and behold, we found in the last month that it doesn't prevent transmissibility. Lo and behold, we found out from the data everywhere but the United States, well, pieces here and there in the Lancet, the famous medical journal, touched base on the fact that it batches of cases in Massachusetts, COVID cases, were among the vaccinated. But you're seeing a lot of this data come out of Scotland, Ireland, Iceland, Gibraltar, Israel, some of the most vaccinated nations in the world, that it's not a pandemic of the unvaccinated. Those who have been vaccinated are ending up in the hospital and testing positive for COVID. And so I think people are in one way or another are seeing contrary data that it doesn't prevent transmissibility, but yet they went and got it because they thought it would protect them. And then basically the whole thing is kind of being called into a question. And I think that's only going to bolster these kind of numbers. It's going to be very difficult to see this turn around in favor of government mandates is essentially what I'm getting at.
I just recalled people saying the mandates are here, people are going to generally support them, and now I'm seeing numbers from Zogby polling showing it's almost flipped, at least from the impression that I was told a few months ago. I'm not sure what the reality of the situation is. I've been accused of rumors that were based upon lies and spread by 30 different news agencies, so I know lies can certainly get out there. But sometimes the truth does too. What do we believe? Was there massive support for the mandate early on and it's dropped down? Or was there not ever really massive support for the mandate? We were lied to, and the Zogby polling is just simply pulling the mask off and showing us the numbers that were either there. We're either looking at a trajectory of a high of support of the mandate dropping down over time, in which case the question is why, or we're looking at support for the mandate never really was that high. We were lied to, and now the veneer is just coming off and we're seeing. I know that these are hypothetical questions, and I know that you can't give a definitive answer, but in your opinion, your professional opinion, watching the polls, studying it, do you think we've seen a de-escalation in support, or has it basically the truth has finally come out? Those are my two narratives for you to choose from.
Well, I think we're at a point now where everybody has made up their mind. I think people we're at a point now where people can't be moved too much. I mean, unless there's an outbreak of Ebola, and it goes beyond the outbreak and it goes pandemic status, and
right.
And you see your community being ravaged. Now that's a different story. But if we're talking about coronavirus, COVID-19, and strains, I think we're 2 years into this pandemic, and people have made up their minds. And those who haven't been vaccinated went through a whole summer and a whole fall of threats of losing their jobs, and there still are, and it's hard to know what the exact number is nationwide. I know over the summer the CDC were showing something like in July it was like maybe half of Americans had not been fully vaccinated. I don't know where that's at now, but I would say after going through the summer and the fall of the threat of losing your job and all kinds of messages like that, I don't think we're going to see too much movement. That's my understanding.
That just again a personal story. I'm not saying this is the truth across the board, across all 50 states, but I knew a few people who were set to lose their job. And it was a very tough Christmas for them, because I know one guy who was a federal employee, and they were going to do the termination letters before Christmas, but they pushed it till a few days past January. And I was like, why would you do the terminations that were originally scheduled right before Christmas and push them a little bit past the beginning of January, unless you wanted to avoid the bad politics of forcing people out of their job right before December 25th? Now, I can't prove that, but I know a couple of people who said it was really difficult to have a good, fun Christmas, knowing that you're probably going to be fired within a few days after Christmas. It was a real bummer. So I could see that. Two other questions I wanted to ask you, though, and then I want to show you some of the polls so you can see them exactly. But I want to ask your opinion about this. On November 18th, the Biden administration stops enforcement of the mandate due to a court ruling. The Biden administration has suspended enforcement of its vaccination and testing requirements for private businesses after a federal appeals court halted the rules pending a review. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit, considered one of the most conservative in the country, ordered OSHA last week to, quotes, take no steps to implement or enforce the mandate until further court order. Judge Kurt B. Engelhardt. Now, on December 7th, so that was November 18th, then we go to December, just a few weeks later, December 7th, federal mandate is stalled due to multiple legal challenges. Quotes, but elsewhere, federal vaccine rules aimed at some 100 million private sector and healthcare workers are tied up in legal morass, with multiple courts now blocking the rules, even as the first deadlines have arrived. Dozens of lawsuits filed by Republican states, businesses, religious organizations, and other organizations seek to overturn the requirement, calling them an overreach of government authority and a threat to employers already stretched thin by the pandemic. If we're going with the de-escalation of support, high support in September, drops down October, November, going into December, Well, November, December, we start seeing actual court challenges where someone with federal level authority is saying, no, you don't, President Biden, get to just order a mandate. And right after that federal Fifth Circuit Court stalls this on November 18th, within 3 weeks, you have multiple Republican states going, I'm going to sue too. So it goes from one legal challenge to multiple legal challenges in the month of November. Do you think that might have something to do with the erosion of support for the mandate? I mean, when Biden first came out with the mandate, it was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
You wait a few months, you think it's going to happen, then all of a sudden a court says, actually, I'm a federal judge and I think it's unconstitutional, and I just stalled the whole thing. We saw that famously throughout the Trump administration. So people are well attuned to the idea that one judge anywhere in the country can shut the whole thing down.
Mm-hmm.
And then we follow up with now multiple states are suing and clogging it up and probably going to force it to the Supreme Court. Did that maybe give some encouragement to the people who opposed the mandate that they might win? And is it possible that that helped encourage them to further erode support for the mandate? They're saying, hey, you don't get to just decree things on high. We can actually fight back with effective ability. Your opinion?
Yeah. I mean, of course, it would bolster them. Of course, it would give them a charge. Although I think even if the next time around, federal judges shoot it down, and pull a 180, I think people are going to fight even harder. Like I said, I think the lines have been drawn in the sand, and I think that there's no real moving on this issue. People know where they stand, and because we've been in this for 2 years, and if those who haven't been vaccinated see that the federal judges jump to their side, of course they're going to celebrate, but if they don't, they're going to mobilize harder. Now let me tell you why I say that. I have data. So the question was, in your view, is it right or wrong to disobey a mandate from a president? So this is really getting to the heart of the issue. Which Americans see presidential mandates as law, and which Americans see presidential mandates as just a mandate? It's not a law. It's whimsical. It's arbitrary, right? And so 39%, which is the plurality, more Americans, 39%, say it's right to disobey a mandate from a president, yet 36% say it's wrong. And of course, about a quarter are on the fence. They don't know where they stand.
Nice.
But slightly more Americans say, I mean, we could even say this is evenly split because it's within the margin of error, but it doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is, millions of Americans do not take presidential mandates to be law. Millions of Americans do. So I think that's really the heart of the issue. This isn't so much. A lot of people think this is partisan. Rights and the interpretation of rights, yeah, it intersects with politics, but at the end of the day, it's actually above partisanship. What you consider to be an inalienable right or a natural right or a civil right is not a democratic, Republican, liberal, left kind of thing. In our tradition, we believe that we have inherent rights, inalienable rights, rights that cannot be taken away. And if you interpret that to mean a presidential mandate does not, supersede a law, that's not partisan. That's not politics. Okay, so this is a great battle, and this is going to go into 2022. It's going to be front and center. It may really hurt the Democrats going into the midterm elections. The Democrats they may have to step back. I don't know that they can, because they've invested so much in this. It may make them appear to look weak.
Fascinating analysis. I'd like to show you 4 articles, one of which is yours.
Okay.
And you tell me what to do. Scroll down, scroll up. I want to look at this question, but just to show everybody, here are the polls. Okay. So you might recognize this one. This is the Zogby strategy polls. Here's the questions it asks. In your view, is mandate wrong to disobey a mandate from a president? It doesn't seem right for you. In your view, is it wrong or right to disobey a mandate from the president? It doesn't seem. What, do you trust local law enforcement? So that seems to be the question you're asking.
Mm-hmm.
Getting this wrong. Here's the Morning Consult Politico poll from November 5th to 2017. Here's what the questions they asked. Let me see if I can find this. I'm trying to find one where they asked specifically in the mandate. Who do you trust more to handle the following issues? Coronavirus? No, that's not it. I haven't looked at these polls
no before,
problem. So give me a second to...
You want to hit Control F and type a keyword in that'll take you to exactly where you want to go?
Sure.
Hit Control F and then I guess mandate is what you're looking for.
Okay, here we go. Yeah. There.
Oh. Okay.
Which follows the closest government mandates to receive if neither is... Oh, okay, here you go. Do you think President Biden's plan to require many U.S. employers to get vaccinated will increase COVID-19 vaccinations? Yeah, I think it's a series of questions. So here's the first one. It's these. What do you think closest government mandates to receive? Should companies support or oppose Biden's plan to require many U.S. employees to get? Okay, so it's basically 200 to 212.
Let's go to table 51.
Table 51.
Let's go page 208. Let's go to that one.
We're going to page 208.
And I'd like to see what the choices are.
This is page 208.
Okay, back to the top here.
Which
of the following comes closest? It mandates to receive, protect the rights of Americans. It violates the rights of Americans. Okay, so among registered voters, which is a difference in the Zogby poll, by the way, is that we take lists of registered voters that we target, and then we screen for the question, how likely are you to vote? Because if you go by registered voter lists, I mean, things change, and people's minds could change, even just among 1% or 2% or 3% of the population. So you ask them, how likely are they to vote? And then you ask them which party they identify with. And these are just little things that we do differently. We do our polls based on likely voters, not registered voters. But that's just a geek out little session I had there.
I get it. But look at this. It says 44 violates the rights of Americans. 45, it protects the rights of Americans. I mean, that's basically matching support against and for the mandate, which is not, again, the popular message that at least myself had heard. I had always heard massive support, majority. This don't look massive. This looks like Civil War type numbers, 50-50. Am I getting this wildly off?
No, because there is a lot of that in the media that there was a perception that it was being against mandates wasn't a very popular thing, and so if you heard that over and over, you believed it. And yes, I'm sure there were polls that came out and showed it was support for the mandates were more popular than being against it. But no, exactly. It's just typical America division. We're divided on a lot of things. So No, you're correct about that.
Yeah, they concluded with this poll that it came out as a majority. Now, maybe there was some other question they looked at, but this is an interesting question in the same poll that the newspaper said, oh, yeah, this poll right here shows the majority supports mandates. Maybe there's some other question. There was many questions where they asked this, but this particular question doesn't look like a majority.
No, and it's definitely not.
Let's take another look. Here's the Axios poll. 60% of voters back Biden's vaccine mandates. Wow, that looks like a majority. Support for federal COVID-19 vaccine mandates and testing. Survey of 10,000 Americans conducted by Axios on September 10th to the 13th, requiring all employees to be vaccinated. Maybe I can find the methodology.
And this is the troubling thing, is that you see how we link straight to our crosstabs. Politico did too. They show you the table. But my question is, click on that index. Where do they show how the question was exactly worded and how it lined up with the other questions?
Right.
And I'm not going to say they didn't do that.
Okay.
But if they didn't do that, that's very troubling. You're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to. It's a good thing to release your data.
How much do you support or oppose making it illegal for companies to deny service or employment to non-vaccinated? All Americans, 51% support, 48% oppose. That's who's at your Thanksgiving table. Let's go back to the original poll. This was the original. What they're saying, the big. Oh, well, this is interesting. The big picture. Respondents were asked two separate questions. Do you support the federal government requiring all federal employees to be vaccinated against COVID-19? And do you support a federal government rule that requires all businesses with 100 or more employees to make all staffing be vaccinated or undergo regular COVID-19 testing? The overall responses were virtually identical. 42% strongly supported both. 18% somewhat supported both. Some 14%. In other words, residents didn't draw major distinctions between mandates.
Okay. So go back up to the top now.
Yeah. How does this equal that? What they just said?
So that's a little game there, and what it would be. It makes sense to put that in the headline. You don't have that much room in the headline, but there should be a sub-headline, like where it says support, and then it should say for federal mandates and for businesses larger than 100. So it gives you the sense, because most people aren't going to take the time and look into the data. Well, it's my belief that a lot of people are intimidated to go that deep into it.
Yeah.
And so that the headline flashes out 60% support mandates. Yeah, but there was a caveat to that. That was for the federal agencies, and then for companies with workers larger than 100. But that does not equate to across the board Americans. So
right here, high concentrations of strong support and strong opposition reinforce the depths of polarization. The overall responses are virtually identical. And then they say 60% support the vaccine. Let's go back here to this poll. 44%, 45% tied on supporting the vaccine. Yet this poll also was claimed to show a majority support the mandates. That's the Morning Political Consult support. They said in the news, this poll says a majority support the mandate. We just saw a poll here that shows it's more like 50-50. Here's a separate poll from a separate agency at a separate time. 60% show the mandates. And then when you get into the number, it's actually more like 50-50. So isn't that interesting that we have two polls by two agencies at two different times that seem to show a tie in opinion, but they were widely reported as saying a majority felt one way? Am I dumb for being slightly confused about what's going on here?
No. Well, this is the problem with headlines. You have to read the finer print. It's like a legal contract.
Right.
You can't go by the first paragraph or the title of the contract. you have to look in the finer print. What I like about what we do is that we put it up front and center for you to see in our releases. So you can go straight to the crosstabs. You can see for yourself the data, and we don't put anything misleading. Like, we don't say the public supports vaccine mandates, but then you go to the finer print and then you find that the vaccine mandate is something highly more specific. But that's rampant though in today's media.
Here you go. Half of Americans back Biden's vaccine mandate or test for private sector. Wall Street Journal poll finds December 7th. 50% of voters said they support Mr. Biden's vaccine mandate. 47% oppose them.
Yeah.
3% difference. Now, Jeremy, tell me if I'm wrong, because I don't have the vast amount of experience in polling you do, but isn't 3 to 5% the standard margin of error for a poll?
3.5. If it's 1,000, yeah.
Sure.
If it's 1,000, and I don't know what the Wall Street Journal did, but
sure.
Yeah, you're right. But again, a lot of this depends on the messaging. Whether you're talking about for large businesses, whether you're talking about Americans in general. Let me give an example. I just dug one up from previously. This was let me get it right here. This goes back to January 29th of 2021. So we're almost a year ago here. And this one I get really nuanced. I offer a third option, okay? Which of the following statements comes closer to your view regarding mandating the mRNA COVID-19 vaccine? The federal government should pass legislation making it mandated. That's one option. Each state should be left to decide what is best for its residents. So taking kind of like what Trump did, a state level mandate if the states want to, or no government should ever mandate medical procedures. And so when you break it down like that, 31% back a federal mandate across the board. 23% say leave it to the states, and 32% say no government ever should mandate medical procedures, including vaccines. So it's really just it really is determined by how you ask the question. And I think in this environment where we're at heading into 2022, I think the way to frame it is personal choice or my body, my choice versus the government and the government mandating it. And so I'm going to stick to that language and I'm going to keep tracking that. And I don't see that dipping below 50%.
Let me show you something here just to sink it all in. So here's the actual quotes of what they said. September 10th to the 13th, 60%. This is the literal quote of what they said. According to the Axios Ipsos poll conducted September 10th to the 13th, 2021, 60% of Americans favor requiring COVID-19 vaccines. However, only 30% of Republicans support the requirements compared to 80% of Democrats and 60%. So that seems to read 60% back it. Let's take a look at the Morning Consult. Literally, these are the quotes from the article. Support for President Biden's vaccine on business with at least 100 employees has slipped 3 points from December, but is still backed by a majority of Americans, according to a Morning Consult political poll. 55%. Let's take a look at the Wall Street Journal. Half of Americans back Biden's vaccine or test mandate for private sector. Wall Street Journal poll finds 50% of voters in the Wall Street Journal poll says they support the requirements for a company with 100 more employees, while 47% oppose them. This is my interpretation, but that article still acts like it's a majority when we're looking at 3% margin of error. And we want to point out to everybody, so this article saying clear majority backs it, clear majority backs it. But we literally just showed you this poll and this poll have other questions in them that show 50-50 support. This poll had a question that showed 50-50 support. This poll had a question that showed 50-50 support. But here are the text of how this is presented. Majority support, majority support. half of America made to seem like a majority support it. And then we go for the first time ever, December 29th, 37% support. And I'm not saying who's wrong, who's right. My personal opinion, you're getting it right. But hey, I'm not a pollster. I don't know. But isn't it interesting how these narratives are so widely divergent? This is kind of one narrative. Yours is different. And yet these two right here, we literally just showed you, managed to not mention they had other questions that seemed to show a 50-50 support while projecting that it was a majority support. Isn't that interesting?
It's the nuances of and the nature of the question. So, like I said, I think the real way to cut to the chase is to put the individual to have on one side the individual and on the other side the government. But I can't deny the fact that, here's the other thing. A lot of people get confused because when they hear, and I know that I was guilty of this too, when they hear, oh, Biden's going to mandate the vaccine, well, that you'll hear that in the news, that he'll mandate, or at least in the headlines. But really what they're talking about is with federal agencies. And then sometimes certain federal agencies are exempt from it. Like when the first mandate came out for federal agencies, United States Postal Service was exempt from that. Now that's funny because that's the one institution of government we have daily contact with. That's the only institution of government that every American has, 6 days out of the week has contact with. So a lot of this is lost in translation, but for me, it just really comes down to individual rights versus government mandates. And when you frame it like that, government mandates don't even come close to having wild support.
I recall what I was told, what the news seemed to say for months on end, and then finally I seemed to see some light at the end of the tunnel that suggested something else from a reputable group of people yourself. It was interesting, and what I called it, my favorite word in politics is counter-narrative.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the narrative, and then here's this little data point that goes, no, I don't agree with any of what you're saying. Explain me away as best as you can. I love that stuff. I recall, though, that without getting into too much, the mandates came after the horrible fall of Afghanistan. I worked in politics for 10 years. It's not a coincidence for a president to have to explain away people falling off airplanes as they escape from Afghanistan, which looks exactly like the fall of Saigon in the 1970s. And then I think a week later he goes, that mandate I said I was never going to do? I'm doing it. Interesting timing that you completely reverse course on something within basically days of one of the worst historical blunders any American president has ever done. Now, is that proof? No. But what incredible political timing, and anybody who works in politics knows damn well what I'm getting at. The other thing is that when he made the announcement, he didn't actually mandate. He said he was going to order OSHA to do it. So there was this, I'm a big bad president, I'm jumping in, I'm providing leadership. But when you looked at the details, it was actually I'm ordering someone else to deal with all the hard work and figure out how to pull this together, and then they're going to do it. I had to talk to a few people who parsed that out. Most people did not get that. Most people didn't get it when it came out that he was acting all big and tough, but when you looked at it, it was kind of an administrative action. Like he was kicking the can down the road to another agency saying, you figure all this out. And if you do it and there's no constitutional challenges, then we'll do it. That reeks of politics. So when I see the timing of the mandate and I see the order of the mandate appears to make him look larger than what he actually did, it reeked. Look at me. I'm still big and powerful and in charge and don't pay attention to anything else. And I'll use whatever shiny object that I need in order to make that happen. Can't prove any of that, but worked in politics. Talk with anybody who works in politics. A major announcement days after a major blunder, and you didn't actually say anything, but you try to make it look like you did. These are classic cheap tricks in politics. Classic.
We have a very similar situation going on here in my state of New York, where earlier this month, Kathy Hochul, the governor, announced a statewide mandate. And if I remember correctly, the mandate was that businesses and should require masks. Public gatherings should require masks, and that businesses could request vaccine status in order to let the customers. It was actually mandated that they should. And so there was a lot of confusion because the day prior in our county there was a mandate that was issued. But you sift through all the noise and you come to find out there was a quote from the governor a couple days later where she said, I'm quoting this almost word for word. She said to the counties, it's up to you to enforce this. I'm really relying on whether you enforce this or not. Well, that's not really a mandate, is it? So there was a lot of confusion. Of course, the news came out about the mandate on a Friday. There was a lot of confusion over the weekend. What's going to happen on Monday? And so, I mean, my perception is a lot of businesses are ignoring it, and they're saying, we're not doing this. This is going to bury us. We've already been hurt over the past couple of years. So it's an analogy to what you're saying, where you hear this language like mandate, which is like all encompassing and very strict and very black and white. But then, like you said, it was for just certain federal agencies, and it was going to be enforced by OSHA. Here we have the governor say mandate, mandate, mandate. Well, it's up to the counties to enforce it or not. Yeah, so I get where you're going.
Again, not saying that's what happened, not saying I can prove it, just saying a coincidence. That in politics, you see this many times when someone's trying to CYA. I won't spell that out for you. And what an incredible coincidence that it perfectly mirrors that this time. And that the numbers don't actually seem to match with the narrative. I didn't know any of that till I talked to you today. That's very weird that there was a lot of misinformation and assumptions people would easily come to that aren't backed by the actual numbers and the data there that seem to almost be projected at a mass scale. Now, again, can't prove that, but look into the coincidences and think about something my Okie grandma told me once when I was 11. Coincidences don't exist. If you look at it that way, suddenly the world looks very different. I'll leave it to you. Last minute comments, anything you think people need to know, something you think people should look into more, questions you'd like them to take away and think over the next few months. What are we missing? What did we not cover? What would be important for the public to get in order to be better educated and more informed about this issue going forward?
Oh, wow. I think that we covered
Sorry, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
Sorry, bro. Sorry, I didn't mean to. Sorry, that newscaster part of me comes out when I get excited. Sorry.
No, that's not a problem. I think what's on most people. Well, if you follow politics, if you don't follow politics, it's not on your mind. But if you follow politics, what's on the mind of most people is what's going to happen with the midterm elections. Here we are. Tomorrow's 2022, and hey, we've got the midterm elections, and right now it's not looking good for the Democrats. Our poll shows that. Independents are more in line with the Republicans. If you ask voters today, would they rather have a Republican or a Democratic Congress? More voters tell us they would rather have a Republican Congress. That's by 5 points. The Democrats have lost a lot of the Hispanic vote. They've lost a lot of the independent vote. That's what buttressed them in 2020. And why? Because of a myriad of reasons, but one overarching reason is because of all-encompassing things like national mandates and Build Back Better. I think the Democrats got drunk on their power, and they saw that they had a mandate to rule, and really they're coming off as the stuffy elitist class. They've aligned with the Davos crowd. They are chanting Build Back Better, which is what Justin Trudeau and Boris Johnson and Christine Lagarde and Klaus Schwab are all saying. Yet I remember the Democrats as the party of the little guy, but they're not really talking like they're the party of the little guy. Lo and behold, they're the ones who actually, coming out of the pandemic, hurt the little guy. Those who are poor and those with small businesses were crippled by the pandemic. And so the Democrats came to power in 2020, and they tried to ram down the throat of Americans and their opposition an agenda. And now there's a backfire. And good old James Madison, God rest his soul, and thank God he came up with this elaborate system of checks and balances where it is impossible, it is a nearly impossible to ram things down the throat of the public. You have to get the public support. You have to reach out to the other aisle. And the Democrats failed at that, and it looks to be that they could very well be punished in 2022 because of that.
Personal story to back up what you're saying. So we had the recall election for Governor Newsom here in California. And I was out at the tables where they were getting people to sign the recall petitions. Half of those people were Latinos, and they were working class Latinos, and they were not Trump fans. Just saying. The news in California said everybody who backs the recall is a white supremacist Trump lover. So they routinely said that, and I was there on the ground looking at the people signing these things going, hey, you look a little bit like me. Love Trump? No, I hate Trump. I run my own small independent business, healthcare, cleaning homes, taking care of yards, doing yard work. That means I'm an independent contractor, and now I can't go out and do anything, and I'm supposed to just sit here receiving a check. Latin people are hardworking people. They don't like welfare. They don't like handouts. They like working hard and getting money. And for somebody to say, you don't get to go out, you don't get to make money, you don't get to do anything, and then say, oh, and if you disagree with you, you're a white supremacist who likes Trump, I got to tell you, it's pretty damn offensive. And so a lot of Latinos did not vote for Newsom in the recall. And then they interviewed Newsom after the election. And he was shocked at the lack of Latin support. And I go, you're governor, you're a Democratic governor of a Democratic state with one of the highest Latin populations, and you didn't actually know how Latin people thought. You thought they all just were going to back you instead of actually understanding us. It was like when Joe Biden said, if you don't know who you're voting for, you're not black.
Yeah.
It was Newsom saying, hey, you're not Latin if you don't vote for me. And then a lot of Latin people did not vote for him, not because they hated him, but because he was bad for their jobs. Not because they loved Trump, but because he was bad for them having employment. And Newsom completely didn't get that and was totally shocked at the lack of Latin support. Now we fast forward to the word, which I always opposed, Latin X.
I was just going to talk about that.
Latin X. So when that came out, I'm like, okay, maybe I should do this. I'll kind of sit on the fence and see if it goes. And I would ask other Latinos, like, do you use this word? I've heard of it. That's not the same as using it. I've heard of it. And so I was going, are we using this? For an entire year? Then a poll comes out. 3% of Latinos actually use this. Okay, well, if 3% of us are using this, why is the Democratic Party using this all the time? That's not democracy. That didn't actually come from us. So who's saying that this is how you reach out to Latin people? And obviously, it's the same people who got it so wrong that they lost Latin votes, which went to conservatives across America and in California. And so when you're talking about Democrats out of touch and not knowing their people, that's just a personal story where I'm saying, hey, I'm sitting here as a Latino. You guys got it so wrong about how we like to call ourselves and what our motivations were for politics in California. And this is the number one Latin state. So how should we have faith in the Democratic Party if you couldn't even figure out how we like to refer to ourselves and you couldn't even figure out what we actually wanted in an election?
I think that the Democrats have become the party of the lecturing academic. And, an academic, I don't want to be offensive here because not all academics are like this, but
sure,
there's a stereotype of the academic who's in the ivory tower, who reads books and who thinks they know the way the world works, theoretically, but they don't pound the pavement. And what we saw happen in November of 2020 in Virginia and quite frankly, New Jersey was a Republican ground game. All politics is local. People don't think they can control the weather, Build Back Better, and the climate change and all of that. I'm not saying it's not important. I'm just saying that people are people are getting paid less. People are downsizing their lives. And right now, the emittance of CO2 doesn't guarantee getting food on the table. It doesn't guarantee their kid getting ahead in their education. So they're looking at critical race theory. They're looking at, hey, your child may not be able to go to school if they're not vaccinated next year, because that's a very possible reality. And so the Republicans were on the ground listening to people's rage, listening to suburban mothers rage at what was going on in the school boards, and the feds were showing up and they were saying, well, these people are white nationalists. And that just shows you how out of touch the Democrats are, that you could be corrected with such self-righteousness for daring to call somebody a Hispanic, yet, and I just pulled up the poll, you're spot on. Not only is it that only 3% of Hispanics actually use it, 76% have never even heard of it. So my message to the Democrats is, you used to be synonymous used to be known as the party of the little guy, which kind of implied that you were on the streets. You guys were the ones saying Black Power. You guys were the ones that were saying end racism and segregation. That was because you were out in the streets. You were protesting. You were saying question the establishment, question everything. Anti-war, and you've gotten too comfortable. You've gotten too separated from what's going on the ground. You need to get back on the ground and see what people are thinking about and feeling, and what their hopes and their fears are. And that could turn it around, because they would find that the ideas that they have right now about what the public thinks and what the public feels is totally out of whack with the reality.
I find it interesting that I was horrified. I'm not a big AOC supporter, but when she said that what Donald Trump was doing to Latino children on the border was close to concentration camps, I looked into it and I agreed. What shocked me was that the Biden administration did the exact same thing. And they did
the
it
Obama
so long.
administration.
Yeah. Oh, and thank you. The Obama administration with Biden started the policy of separating kids in cages. Absolutely true. Managed to keep that hidden. Also, Obama did not look into the multiple cases of border guards raping and abusing Latinos, which led to a climate of border guards having fantasies about rape, which was interesting because AOC confronted one of the border guards going, how come you have these pictures of border guards raping me because I'm a Latino? Well, AOC, the reason that happened is because Obama knew about it and did nothing to punish these people, which allowed a toxic climate to continue for 5 years. So it's actually Obama's fault that happened, because he could have cleaned house and chose not to. Now we're looking at Biden, kids in cages, concentration camp conditions. And I love that the fact it took a year, but finally some political organizations were going, yeah, this is basically the same thing as Trump, and Democrats don't seem to care too much. I don't even see AOC bring it up too much. Kamala Harris was pounded about this, but she's still out there. So funny how it was okay to treat Latin people like Warsaw Ghetto Jews in the 1930s, horrible during Trump, but okay during Biden, and multiple people saying it's the same thing. At the same time, the same Democratic Party that continued the policies of Trump is the same one saying, oh, you're all Latinx people, and you all think the way that we're supposed to tell you to think. And Biden couldn't even pronounce the last name of his Latino appointee, Mayorkas and Becerra. And he also had his wife go out to California, and she couldn't even say si se puede, correct, which is a pivotal Latin phrase. So I'm seeing these data points that suggest, hey, brown folk, shut up and do what you're told. We know what's best for you. And I find that interesting, because I thought over the Trump period, you were right. They were the group fighting for the little people, fighting to give a voice to the disenfranchised. And now I see ivory tower elites who don't really know Latin people and want them to kind of shut up and sit in the back of the bus and do what they're told. Interesting, isn't it? A little bit.
It's a flipping. Like in Bizarro World, everything flips, right?
I love you, bro. Okay, last minute comments, and then we'll wrap it up. Anything you think people need to say, see, look into? What would you like people to stay tuned and watch? Question, look into more.
Okay. Well, follow the independent vote, follow the Hispanic vote, follow what's happening with African Americans. Their numbers came in a little bit lower for Biden, and there's some talk around town of a certain personality coming back into play in 2024. I don't know how it's possible, but listening to an absolute pioneer in the world of polling and analysis or political analysis, Dick Morris, listen to what he had to say. I'm talking about Hillary Clinton and the prospects of Hillary Clinton making a reappearance in 2024. So take a look into that. That's
why not? Let's do it all over again. Let's have Trump versus Hillary, do the whole thing over again, 2024. Why not? People love sequels, right? Lethal Weapon 1 was okay. Lethal Weapon 2 was awesome. Let's do it again. Bigger, badder, better. More investigations, more threats.
You can listen. You can never get old with the Rocky series. What are we on? Rocky 8 right now?
Yeah. People love sequels, and there'd be a lot of people going, "Yeah, Hillary had this one line, if she said it would have destroyed Trump," and Trump supporters going, "If he just did this one thing, it would have destroyed Hillary." This is their chance, to fight the war the way they wanted it to be fought. So
but that just shows you how dire the situation is for the Democrats, because what people were saying going into 2020, a lot of people were saying, okay, you kind of knew it was going to be Biden, that he was going to be the nominee because he had been with Obama, and pretty much every poll was showing him ahead. But once it got down to Biden, people weren't crazy about him. And today, his approval rating, we have at 46%, which is a little bit higher than the real Clear Politics average, which is like 43% approve. But here's what you got to look at. Almost just as many people strongly disapprove. Because when you're looking at these approval ratings, people combine strongly and somewhat approve. That's how you get 46%. And then you look at somewhat disapprove and strongly disapprove, and that's how we came up with 52. But of those 52% in the combined disapprove, 40% strongly disapprove. Almost as many people strongly disapprove of Biden as the combined approval. So the point is that he's not really, people aren't really enthusiastic about Biden. It was just enough voters said we don't want Trump. Yeah. So it calls into question, as we get to 2024, who the heck is going to excite the base of the Democrats?
Michelle Obama. That's what I'm hearing. That's what
that's
what I'm hearing.
If she ran, she would be wildly popular. There's no question about that. But I mean, you almost have to say, you got to be. Do you really want? With the life that you have right now, do you really want to do that?
Oh yeah. The other thing is like, sports car looks great at the lot. The moment you test drive it and it breaks down within the first 5 minutes and it costs you $500,000 to repair it, you go, oh.
Yeah.
Michelle Obama's never done any actual governing or legislating. Yeah. I mean, she gets in there and starts doing one bonehead thing. It's going to show the lack of experience, which I'm not saying she's dumb. I'm just saying she has no experience. If she had been senator for 6 years, I'd have a totally different opinion of her. She has no experience.
Yeah, we have no idea what she can be like under pressure. Would she become completely unhinged? We don't know.
Maybe she would do great, but I would prefer to see you in the driver's seat for a couple laps before I let you race the car. Yeah. And we just don't know. It's equivalent to, they want to run The Rock. It's the same thing on the conservative side. He's popular. What experience does this man have? We are literally turning into idiocracy where, it's superstar wrestlers get to be presidents because they look strong and they got a great costume and they're good on the microphone, and that's, you know, what people respond to. That was an old movie, but I just wonder.
I remember.
Yeah, I just wonder because I'm starting to say, oh, The Rock, yeah, Michelle Obama, yeah, and I'm like, have you spent 2 seconds thinking about what you're saying? Like, how do you know they're going to be any good? They might be. I mean, we just saw a reality star as president, didn't we? And all they talked about was how he didn't know to do things. Well, the solution to that is to suggest 2 more reality stars. Really?
Yeah.
Okay, well, sounds like everything's going to work out just fine, and we are not headed to the apocalypse. That was a joke. I think it's good science, and it's definitely not good.
No, it's a question we actually asked. Do you believe we're living in end times? I'm going to end on this, okay?
Okay.
Let me go get that data, and then I got to go out. I got to go out and get ready here.
I know, but before you go, what's the support for we live in end times?
Oh, I'm pulling it up 1 second.
Oh my God! Well, we're going to end on a high note for you watching at home. Go ahead and get your end of the world collapse kit ready. Perhaps visit your house of worship, whatever belief system you follow.
Okay, do you agree or disagree that we are living in something like end times or the apocalypse? And we did a scale of strongly agree to strongly disagree. I'm going to combine the agree, the strongly, and the somewhats to make agree and disagree. And 45% agree that we're living in something like end times or the apocalypse, and 35% disagree. So 20% aren't sure.
Can you email me that link?
Yeah. Well, I can create the link and I can email you that. That's going to be a future release. So actually, could you just wait for that?
Never mind. I'll have you back on.
You'll get the full.
Fine. But you heard it here first at Marc Ruiz Evans interviews. Can't release those numbers yet, but you did hear first coming up. There's a poll showing more support for America's in the end times than those who believe that it's not. Okay, well, good luck on trying to get sleep for the rest of the week. And I want to say Happy New Year.
Okay, I heard this once, and it's pretty inspiring. There is no final battle, so just get used to rolling up your sleeves and fighting like hell. There's no final battle.
An era of constant warfare, like the 100 years period in Japan and China, where there was no stability or peace for a century until a great dictator came and crushed everything, and they grew up in eras of warfare. Sorry, that's the first thing that comes to my head. You're right. It could be nice and simple, but we've seen warring states periods where they just go into this, it's always conflict, and they don't actually devolve to chaos. Like China and Japan never actually achieved apocalypse. They just had these rival kingdoms and a 100-year period of warfare while keeping a lot of their infrastructure and governments intact. And I'm wondering if we're postulating, is that the way that America would go, where it's not going to be some mass apocalypse like in a zombie film. It's going to be regional governments just not cooperating with each other, and kind of a children growing up for 5 to 7 generations knowing nothing but warfare and conflict on a mass scale. Well, okay, on a happy note, I wish you Happy New Year. I wish your family the best.
Same here. I wish you a Happy New Year. Wish your family the best. And we'll be tracking stuff, and you'll be hearing from us. So take care, man.
All right. Nothing but love.